Imagine dedicating like a decade of your life, sacrificing your 20s and moving across the sea to learn how to save lives.
Right.
Only to end up sitting in your car in the pouring rain, realizing the hospital is actually destroying yours.
Wow. Yeah.
Today, we are looking at what happens when the doctor becomes the patient. And we are speaking directly to you, the Malaysian healthcare professional listening to this right now.
Absolutely.
Because whether you are a house officer trying to survive a steeply overwhelming ward, or a nurse carrying an immense emotional load, or even a specialist holding the heavy burden of leadership, this deep dive is for you.
It really is.
You walk into environments of high stress and profound human suffering every single day. But today, we're turning the focus around.
Yeah, because to care for others in a way that is actually sustainable, we first have to look at what happens when the caregiver themselves desperately needs care.
Exactly.
We are pulling from an incredibly insightful book by psychiatrist Dr. Fang Shankar titled "Jom Mindful Jim Now Nawabu: Practical Mindfulness for Healthcare Professionals."
Such a great resource.
It is. And specifically, we are exploring an anonymous story tucked away in Chapter 19. It's called "The Other Side of the Stethoscope."
Right.
It strips away that polished exterior society expects from medical workers, and it exposes the very real psychological toll that medical training can take.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the story starts with a recent graduate, right? He was ambitious, and his ultimate dream was to become a surgeon.
Yeah, he was super driven.
Like, while waiting for his placement, he even worked as a personal trainer to build up his physical discipline. He really wanted to be ready.
He was putting in the work before the work even started.
Totally. And when it came time for his housemanship, he actively chose a hospital in Borneo, far away from his family in peninsular Malaysia.
Right, which is a huge move.
It is. And he did this because he genuinely believed the sacrifice and the tough environment would, forge him into a better doctor.
He wanted a challenge.
Exactly. He expected the long hours. He expected the crushing workload. He fully expected to make mistakes and to be corrected.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, there is a fundamental difference between rigorous clinical teaching and systematic psychological breakdown.
Oh, absolutely.
What he encountered wasn't constructive correction. It was public humiliation.
Yeah, he describes being shouted at during ward rounds right in front of the patients he was supposed to be treating.
That is just, it's devastating.
Right. He was publicly reprimanded for minor mistakes that easily could have been addressed privately, and the isolation quickly set in.
Of course it did.
Colleagues didn't see him as a learner. They saw him as a burden, slowing the system down. I mean, even junior colleagues began speaking to him with visible frustration.
And, that kind of environment breeds a very specific type of silence.
What do you mean?
Well, the ward keeps moving, the patients keep waiting, but inside the individual, everything just stops.
Wow. Yeah.
You start wondering who heard the shouting. You wonder if everyone thinks you are incompetent.
And you're so far from home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because you are isolated across the South China Sea, away from your support system, you eventually stop wondering and just start believing it yourself.
And his body started keeping the score.
It always does.
He describes mornings where he would stand outside the ward doors, completely unable to make his legs walk inside.
Just frozen.
Completely. I mean, nobody had shouted yet. Nobody had criticized him that day. But he would be standing there, sweating profusely, his heart racing out of his chest, his breathing incredibly shallow. He wanted to turn around and run.
He was experiencing full-blown panic attacks.
Right.
But at the time, he didn't realize what they were. He just believed he was weak.
Wait, I have to stop you there and play devil's advocate for a second.
Okay, go for it.
This is a guy who spent years studying human physiology and pathology.
Yeah.
He knows exactly what tachycardia, diaphoresis, and hyperventilation look like clinically.
Oh, for sure.
So how does a highly trained medical professional experience textbook panic attacks and just conclude, well, I'm just weak?
That is the power of the cult of invulnerability in medicine.
The cult of invulnerability. I like that.
It's real. From the moment you enter medical school, society and the profession reinforce a rigid script, which is that doctors must always have the answers.
Right. You're supposed to be bulletproof.
Exactly. Patients look to you for reassurance, families trust you with their lives, and colleagues rely on you to be the rock under pressure.
Yeah.
There is no room in that cultural script for the doctor to be the one trembling outside the door.
That makes a lot of sense.
So when a doctor inevitably hits a completely normal psychological limit, the profession's culture makes them view that limit not as a physiological response to extreme stress, but as a profound personal failure.
It's like a high-performance engine, you
Oh,
know?
I like that analogy.
Yeah, like you can build it with the finest engineering in the world. You can tune it perfectly. But if you run it without oil, and in this case, the oil is basic support and empathy, the internal friction of the environment will inevitably cause it to seize. It doesn't matter how well built the engine is. Without lubrication, it breaks. And then the culture of the garage blames the engine for breaking.
That is exactly the mechanism of burnout. The culture tells the engine it is weak for seizing.
Exactly.
Think about how many of you listening right now have sat in your car for an extra 10 minutes before a shift, just trying to mentally armor up before walking through those doors.
Too many, I'm sure.
That isn't weakness. That is the internal friction taking its toll.
And that friction culminated for him on a rainy night in February 2018.
Yeah, this part is tough.
He was sitting alone in his car outside his rented house after another exhausting shift. He was crying uncontrollably, his chest was tight, and he called his parents. Between his sobs, he told them, "I don't want to be a doctor anymore."
Wow.
The psychological burden had entirely eclipsed his lifelong dream.
That moment in the car is the breaking point. It wasn't that he suddenly hated medicine. It was that he truly believed medicine no longer wanted him.
So true. He did finally seek psychiatric help after that night, though.
He did.
But he admits he didn't go because he genuinely recognized he needed mental health treatment. He went because he thought getting a psychiatric diagnosis would give him the administrative excuse he needed to get transferred closer to his home.
Right. He was just looking for a way out of that specific hospital.
Exactly. He was diagnosed with adjustment disorder and major depressive disorder, but he completely rejected the diagnoses.
Yeah, he was in denial.
He thought, oh, it's just the environment, it's just the people.
Denial is an incredibly common protective mechanism, especially in high-achieving individuals.
Sure.
An adjustment disorder essentially means your emotional or behavioral reaction to a stressful event is disproportionately severe, and it's actively impairing your ability to function.
Right.
And major depressive disorder represents a fundamental shift in mood regulation and brain chemistry.
Which is serious.
Very serious. But for someone whose entire self-worth is tied to being the smart, capable problem solver, accepting those diagnostic labels feels like admitting defeat.
Especially when you look at the reaction of his peers.
Oh, their reactions were awful.
When he tried to confide in a close colleague, the response was, "There is no such thing as depression."
Unbelievable.
I know. Other people gave him advice that was probably well-intentioned but incredibly damaging. They told him to man up, or they'd say everyone goes through hardships, or it's all in your head.
Every one of those comments just reinforces the isolation. It confirms his worst fear, that he is the only one failing to handle the pressure.
Yeah. So feeling completely isolated and ashamed, he barely took his medication, he missed his appointments.
Because he didn't want to believe he needed them.
Right, and ultimately his application for a transfer was rejected.
Oh, man.
Feeling he had absolutely no other option, he submitted his resignation, he walked away from medicine entirely.
A huge loss for the field.
Definitely. He eventually took a job as a medical sales representative, and on paper, his life got instantly better.
I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, he had a great salary, his colleagues were kind, he had an excellent work-life balance, and he no longer woke up with that crushing sense of dread.
On the surface, it looks like the ultimate success story of escaping a toxic workplace.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
By all metrics, he won. He got out of the toxic environment, he's making good money, he's sleeping well, but the story says he was still miserable.
Yeah.
He admits that every time someone asked him a medical question, or every time he drove past a hospital or saw his former classmates progressing, he felt this deep, unexplainable emptiness.
It haunted him.
So why wasn't getting out the same thing as getting better?
Because escaping the physical environment doesn't erase the profound grief of a lost identity.
Ah, a lost identity.
Exactly. For him, medicine was never just a job to pay the bills. It was his core identity. It was who he was.
Right, he trained his whole life for it.
So when he left, he was grieving the death of the future he had spent a decade building. And there is a key concept in Dr. Fang's book that explains this perfectly. You cannot serve from an empty vessel.
Ah, so when he resigned, his vessel was completely empty, and by moving to medical sales, he didn't fill the vessel.
Precisely. He merely moved his empty vessel into a different room.
Wow.
The stress of the ward was gone, but the emptiness remained because his calling was left unfulfilled. If your entire self-worth is wrapped up in one single profession, taking off that uniform leaves you feeling like you have nothing left.
That makes a lot of sense. So he sits with this empty vessel for almost 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, he decides he has to try again. After a long process, he reapplies for housemanship, this time at a hospital closer to home.
A brave move.
Very brave. He tries to mentally prepare himself for everything he knew was coming. But just 11 days after his orientation, he has a difficult, harsh interaction with the senior medical officer in the neonatal intensive care unit.
Oh, no.
And instantly, everything comes rushing back.
All of it, the panic, the tightness in the chest, the overwhelming certainty that history was just repeating itself.
Right.
The environment triggered the exact same physiological response.
He was entirely ready to quit a second time. He literally contacted Human Resources that afternoon to get the resignation letter template.
He was right back where he started.
Yeah, and the voices around him were saying things like, if it's not meant for you, it's not meant for you. And why can everyone else do it, but you can't?
Which is just so unhelpful.
He was standing right on the edge of walking away forever.
Yeah.
But then his girlfriend, who is now his wife, by the way, stepped in.
Thank goodness for her.
Truly. She had been there through all the panic attacks in Borneo. She didn't tell him to be stronger. She didn't tell him to push through it.
Right.
She told him, if you decide to quit, I'll still be here. But she asked him for one thing. Before he made that final decision, she asked him to give help one more chance by going to see Dr. Feng Cheng Kar.
That unconditional support is a lifeline.
It really is.
It removed the pressure to perform. She validated his option to leave, but gently guided him toward professional help first, basically creating a safe space for him to just breathe.
So he goes to see Dr. Feng. And the author is very clear. There was no overnight cinematic miracle here.
Right. Healing takes time.
There was no single morning where he woke up and magically felt cured. But there was a massive breakthrough in that consultation room.
What's fascinating here is how simple the breakthrough actually was.
Yeah, the turning point was simply that Dr. Fang treated him like a human being.
Exactly.
Not as a struggling house officer, not as a trainee who was falling behind, just as a human.
That sounds incredibly simple, but let's look at the mechanism of why that works.
Okay.
For years, everyone in his professional sphere had spoken to the failing doctor in him. They communicated with the white coat, the title, the role he was struggling to perform.
Right, they only saw the label.
When Dr. Fang spoke to him, he bypassed the white coat entirely. He spoke to the frightened, exhausted young man beneath it.
We can call that the power of delabeling, I guess. Doctors treat human beings all day long, but they are rarely treated as human beings themselves.
It's so true.
By stripping away the doctor label in that room, the patient didn't have to analyze his own psychiatric treatment plan through the lens of professional shame.
Exactly. Removing that heavy burden label allowed the human being to finally put his guard down.
Yeah.
He stopped evaluating himself as a medical professional who should know better. And for the first time, he just allowed himself to be a patient in pain. He allowed himself to accept the care he desperately needed.
He allowed himself to become a patient. That is a massive shift.
Huge.
And the reality of his return to the wards is what makes this story so grounded. The wards didn't magically change.
No, the system is still the system.
When he went back, he still made mistakes. He still got shouted at in front of others. He still had to deal with difficult, harsh colleagues. The medical system didn't become a softer, gentler place, but he became healthier.
He became insulated.
Insulated.
Yeah, because he had started the work of divorcing his core identity from his daily performance. A harsh comment from a senior officer was no longer a referendum on his value as a human being.
Right. It was just a harsh comment.
Exactly. He learned to navigate the system without internalizing the toxicity.
For those of you listening, walking the wards right now, think about how much lighter your shift would feel if every piece of criticism didn't feel like a fatal attack on your soul.
It changes everything.
His triumph is incredible. I mean, this is the guy who was crying in his car, downloading resignation templates.
Yeah.
He ended up finishing his housemanship without a single extension. He scored an overall performance mark of 95.46%.
That is amazing.
It is. He went on to manage hundreds of patients a day in an incredibly busy government primary care clinic. And today, he has completed his compulsory service and is practicing as an aesthetic physician. He crossed the finish line.
It proves that his initial breakdown was never a lack of capability or intelligence.
No, not at all.
It was a lack of support.
Yeah.
It is a phenomenal testament to what happens when a healthcare worker is actually supported rather than shamed.
And The greatest realization he shares is about sitting on the other side of the consultation table. He realized that becoming the patient didn't make him a weaker doctor, it actually made him a vastly more compassionate one.
This raises an important question, though, about how we view vulnerability in healthcare.
How do you mean?
Well, we so often treat it as liability, something to hide. But experiencing the patient's side, knowing intimately what it feels like to be terrified, to feel broken, to desperately need a lifeline, it teaches a kind of profound lived empathy that textbooks simply cannot impart.
You can't learn that in a lecture hall.
Right. You can memorize all the clinical signs of a panic attack, but until you have felt your own chest tighten outside a ward door, you cannot fully grasp the terror your patients are experiencing.
Absolutely.
This reinforces the core philosophy woven throughout Dr. Fang's book, which is self-care as we care. By having the courage to let himself be a patient, he ensured that he could continue being a healer.
So, what does this all mean? If you are listening to this right now, gearing up for your next shift, dealing with the alarms, the charting, and the sheer weight of human life in your hands, we want to distill this incredible story down to 3 concrete messages for you to take into the hospital today.
Listen closely to these.
Number 1, divorce your core identity from your profession. You are a human being first. The stethoscope is just a tool you use. If your self-worth is entirely tied to your white coat, you will always be an empty vessel outside the hospital.
Spot on.
Number 2, understand the mechanism of burnout. Seeking help isn't weakness, it is the necessary oil for your engine. You cannot outwork or outstudy physiological and psychological exhaustion.
You really can't.
And number 3, experiencing the other side of the stethoscope, knowing intimately what it means to fall apart and be vulnerable, does not diminish your clinical skills. It makes you a vastly more effective, empathetic caregiver.
The illusion of the invulnerable doctor is not just unrealistic. It actively harms the people we rely on the most to keep us healthy.
So here is our call to action for you. Do not wait until you are crying in your car in the rain. Ask for help early.
Who's who?
Do not wait until the friction is so high that your engine completely seizes. Be honest with yourself and allow your family, your friends, your colleagues, and your own doctors to show up for you exactly the same way you show up for your patients every single day. Let them care for you.
And as you head into your next shift, I want to leave you with one final thought from the source material to reflect on.
Okay.
It's a very simple but profound truth about all of this. Healing, real healing, only begins when one finally allows oneself to be heard.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We wish you immense compassion, both for your patients and for yourselves, and safe shifts ahead. You don't have to pretend the internal friction doesn't hurt. And more importantly, you don't have to run this race alone. Take care of yourselves out there.